a lot of my early research and continuing through now has been on trying to figure out, how do people estimate mate value, right? How do I decide how attracted I am to this person given all the things that I want in a partner? And there are, a handful of different models out there that people propose, but there wasn't much in the literature when I started doing this work, right? So my first step was just come up with as many different ways as I think are plausible that this could happen, either coming from the literature or just coming from my head. And the first thing that I thought would be true is, I think, the first thing that most people think or thought would be true, which is that it's basically going to be what's called like a weighted sum, right? So basically, let's say I'm thinking about physical attractiveness and intelligence, right? I have a preference for physical attractiveness. I have a preference for intelligence. Let's say I prefer physical attractiveness more than you do. Well, what does that mean in terms of, how we make our decisions, right? I think the most common way that people think this works is that our preferences kind of act like weights in our evaluations. So if I prefer physical attractiveness more than you do, then what that means is, physical attractiveness makes up a larger part of my evaluations than it does of your evaluations, right? Physical attractiveness weighs more in my decisions than it does in your decisions. I honestly thought, I think that's the default assumption that most people make. And when I started doing this research, I was like, that's obviously correct. That's going to be the one that does the best. And then I came up with this other one that I was like, well, it could be maybe what I have is like in my head, I have an ideal image of a partner who is, such and such physically attractive and such intelligent. And what I do is every time I encounter a partner, I just compare them to that like prototypical ideal. And the closer they are to that ideal, the more attracted I'll be to them, right? And you can see how that's like, I know this is getting very abstract, but that's a little bit different from the weight approach I mentioned just a minute ago. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like that could be, I think that's probably wrong, but that's something that somebody could imagine is true. So I'll throw that in there, I'll test it, and I'll show that it's wrong, and then we'll move on. And then, I threw in some other ones too. And then I did the work, and it was just like this distance one, this like prototypical ideal that just blew the others out of the water. Like this is very clearly the much better model. And it's, continued to be the much better model across all the work that I've done. It's really like, I've completely changed my belief on that one. I really thought the weighted sum was going to be the one that pulled ahead, but it's just consistently this sort of ideal prototype model that has been the one that keeps winning. As far as something else that was sort of like a kind of key finding and or something surprising, this is what I'm pretty excited about lately. This is actually coming from a paper that just officially got published a couple days ago by coincidence, or yesterday actually by coincidence. So in order to do a lot of this work, it's pretty complicated, right? Because some of these mate choice models, they're complicated. They've got a lot of moving parts. It's not necessarily clear, how to derive predictions from them and how to test those predictions cleanly against human data. So a lot of the work that I've done over the last couple of years has been trying to develop an approach that can let us test these models more clearly. And the approach is basically this. We call it couple simulation. The idea is, and you might have seen me talk about this before, you go out into the world, you get people who've already made choices. So people who are already in a relationship, you measure things about those people that you think is relevant to their choices, and then you create little simulated copies of those people, inside your computer. And then you can run those little simulated copies of those people through simulated mating markets that work according to whatever mate choice model you think is interesting. And you can see what mate choice models do the best job of pairing those little simulated copies of real world people back with their actual partners. Right? The idea being, if I'm simulating mate choice correctly, if I understand how mate choice really works and I simulate it accurately in my computer, I should be able to take these little avatar agents and put them back together, right? They should make the same decisions that their real world counterparts did, and they should tend to form the same relationships again. If you think like the Black Mirror episode, Hang the DJ, it's sort of like that. So, we've been doing this work for a while now, and we have an initial paper where we show this method works in theory, and we show we can develop some models that do a relatively good job of, you can take real world couples, simulate them, break them up, and then run them through this mate choice model, and you can do a really good job of reproducing those original couples, like, often reproducing somewhere in the neighborhood of 45% or more of those real world couples using these simulated models. So all of that is cool. But the thing that surprised me is this. So all of this was just designed to evaluate models of mate choice, was just to see, can we accurately pair people back together? But just by chance, we happened to also ask these people, like, how's it going, right? Like, are you satisfied in this relationship? Are you committed to your partner? Are you in love? Are you jealous? Like all these sort of standard relationship quality questions, just because we're like, we might want this for other projects. We'll see. So I said, we're able to reproduce somewhere in the neighborhood of about 45% of these real world couples, right? And then I got to thinking, like, well, okay, 45%, that's pretty good, but like, what's different between the 45% we're getting right and the 50% we're getting wrong? And one of my colleagues, she phrased this beautifully, I thought. She said, well, is it the model that is wrong, or is it the people that are wrong? And that was a question. Like, maybe these are just people that should not be in a relationship together, right? Maybe some of these people, just made bad mate choices. And so what we did is we looked at those relationship quality variables between the couples that we're simulating correctly and the couples that we're simulating incorrectly. And what we see is, across the board, the couples that we are able to accurately reproduce in these simulations are just happier. They're more satisfied, they're more committed, they're more in love, they're more everything. And the couples that we're reproducing inaccurately are less happy. And that, totally unpredicted, totally unexpected. And I still don't have a good explanation for it. I have no idea, what these models are picking up on that is explaining this difference in satisfaction and commitment between these couples. But we've replicated it like 5 or 6 times now. It seems to be a quite robust phenomenon that the couples that we are able to accurately simulate are just happier.
Is there a variable that sticks out? I know that you mentioned, like, are you jealous or something like that? Was there a question that was really present?
That's a good question. I mean, it seems to be just across the board, right? Which is, especially, these dimensions do tend to be correlated with one another, right? If you're more satisfied, you tend to be less jealous. If you're more in love, you tend to be more satisfied. So they do all kind of hang together. But these are also, pretty distinct evaluations of the partners, but we see pretty much the same effect size across all these different dimensions. So it just seems to be a kind of across the board higher relationship quality, at least as far as we can tell. I initially thought it's something like, maybe the people that were accurately predicting, their partners just matched their preferences better, right? Maybe they're just like, they're getting better matches. It's not that. Then I was like, maybe the people that were matching, maybe they're just super desirable people, and super desirable people are happier in their relationships for some reason. It's not that. Maybe it's, the people that were matching inaccurately, they're the ones who have, lots of really good outside options, whereas the people that were matching correctly are the ones that don't have lots of good outside options. I still think that maybe has some truth to it, but as far as we can tell, it's not that. At least we haven't found the smoking gun evidence that's true. But, I'm unsure. It's a mystery, but it's an exciting mystery, right? I think it's cool that we have models that for some reason are able to identify happy couples, but it's perplexing that I don't know exactly what the models are doing to do that.
Yeah. This ideal prototype model, like while you were going through the weighted sum and then this ideal prototype, I was like, wow, I've definitely had like an ideal prototype my whole life. Yeah. And I've always compared somebody to that. And it's definitely how I chose my current partner. Like, it's so interesting how that is like so present in my mind, and it always has been. And yeah, I know there's the evolutionary impact, but yeah, I'm so curious about like the environmental impact that kind of formed what that image and prototype is. Yeah, so many layers.
Agreed. It's funny. It's interesting that I think it's interesting that you had that intuition, right? Because I think so many researchers, when they come at this, they're like, no, it's a weighted sum, or no, it's like a threshold thing. The ideal prototype is, I think, one of the least popular models, although it's, in my research at least, one of the ones that keeps coming out is performing relatively well. So it's interesting that that's your intuitive experience. And I'll take it as supportive for me.
Yeah, definitely.
But no, that I think that's this goes back to like my early interests, which I had long abandoned, but now I'm sort of coming back around to. Is I mean, I wouldn't contrast the evolutionary and environmental effects, right? Because whatever environmental effects there are on our preferences, right? Those environments have those effects because we evolved to respond to them in the way that we did, right? So it's evolution that makes those environmental effects possible. But those are still really important to understand, right? Like I think, okay, great, we know what people want when we ask them as, like adults, but like, where do those desires actually come from? Yeah, like what is the developmental trajectory of these preferences? And yeah, how does your prior experience on the mating market, your prior experience with relationships, your life experience in general, right? How does that intersect? How do all those things intersect to create your desires? We have very little answer to, and that is disappointing and alarming.
Thanks for watching, everybody. We appreciate you tuning into that, and we hope you found that helpful.
If you're interested in watching more professors give us a deep dive in some of their areas of expertise, please click on the video below.
And also subscribe right here. We hope you have a good day.
See you in the next one.
See ya.